All right. Hey, Zorncho here. All right, say I've got a model and I want it to work for different sizes. This is Dueling Zero v3, so for example, instead of just 15-15, let's say I also want to have 20-20 extrusions, and instead of NEMA 14s, I want 17s, and instead of MGN 7 rails, I want MGN 9, and I want to put that all in one place. There's a way to do it that doesn't require configuration support. I want to show you that very briefly here. Configurations is the feature that's coming out now. It's kind of rolling out slowly and enables you to take features that have different configurations, like small, medium, large, or in my case, completely different types of small, medium, and large printer, and associate different values with those, where each of those values can have its own values associated. So in my case, all those values would be things like what bearing type do I want, and what extrusion type do I want, and what rail type do I want. Each of those could have a whole bunch of parameters that get used in the model. There's a lot more to it than that, but I'm going to show you the Lite version that you can do without having configuration support in your Fusion. Mine doesn't. It would be right up here if it was out there, but I know it's rolling out over the next month. So let's say I've got a model and I want to have two versions of it. I had originally tried to get something kind of like this, or at least build a parametric model when I was building Dueling Zero v3, at least the gantry. So if you go to parameters for this model, the main params are the width and the length, and then a whole bunch of things are derived based on those parameters. Or at least I've got a lot of parameters defined. There aren't too many that are parametrically defined, but I at least wanted to start with that because then it's a lot easier if later down the line you want to make changes, you at least know what your parameters are instead of having to scrape them out from all of your sketches and your model features. So I started over because I want to have 2020 version of Dueling Zero, a Dueling Trident. So this is what it would look like, and I want to show you the Lite version that you can do today. So bringing up the parameters here, I've got quite a few more that are in favorites, and the ones in favorites represent the master type here. This is for V0, whether it has all those other kind of V0-esque parts. For Trident, whether it's got those parts, or there's actually a third, a Trident Maximus, I should say, which would be 30-30 plus 20-20, and then really big belts and rails and stuff like that. And so you've got other parts here that are parameters that are overridable, like extrusion lengths. Here someone might want to do their own customizations, but then you have a whole bunch of types that are core parameters of a config. So let's say I have V0 parts bin. I would specify a motor type, I would specify a belt width. Each of the variables that I'm testing at least once, or values for those parameters, are specified here on the right side. Things like carriage types, bearings, extrusion, those are the main things that would all change based on this type value. So the beauty of using conditional parameters for your model, I'll show you an example here, of parameters that have an equation saying if the type is one value, do one thing, if the type is another value, do another thing, and return a value at the end. You can, based on a number, effectively generate a whole bunch of values specific to that configuration. All right, enough talking. Here's what will happen if I change from 0 to 1. There's a recompute, and then hey, the model got magically bigger. And I changed to 2, and I wait a second, and the model got magically bigger because I have automatic updates set here. This is pretty cool on the right side. This is a 30-30 model with NEMA 23s, pretty chonker with 9mm belts. And again, all I've got to do is change that number. Now, when configurations comes out, it's going to be a lot easier because those top-level configs, which in my case are the type, each of these would be a row in a configuration table, and then each of these columns would be one of these core derived types, which can be overridden. So in my case, for example, they would be things like how big do you want your belt to be, or what carriage types are you using. I've done something kind of beyond what the minimum would be here, and for each of these values, you'll notice that most of them come in pairs. There's a derived value, and then there's the actual value. And by having this additional parameter, it makes it really easy for someone to do an override. So if I want to do something not what is guessed based on the type, not the default for that type, like the size of rail is slightly different, or I'll give another example. Let's say my motor type, I actually want it to be NEMA 17 even though it's 15-15. So in this case, all I would do is, instead of having motor type derived, which is the equation based on the type, I could just directly provide the value. So I could put 17 and that would override it. And then if I've built my model correctly, as you saw I did here, everything updates and I can have both default configurations that have specific values as well as an override. I think that's pretty cool. There's a big question though of whether people who are not paid users of Fusion, once this configurations feature comes out, what they'll be able to do with it, and that's the question mark, and that's why I'm not, even if I had the configurations feature, necessarily committing to it, because you can kind of do this light version where you can enable overrides, you can have your own configurations. It just means a parameters table that's a lot harder to understand and manage, as well as these equations that get kind of unwieldy and harder to change and understand for all of these derived parameters that are your defaults effectively. I hope that was useful. I think it's pretty cool, and I'm also pretty excited about having a dueling trident.